Hello and welcome to the Health Source podcast, your source for all things health, wellness, and lifestyle inspo. I'm your host, Beck Russell, health and life coach and the author of Life in the Soul Lane. Through conscious conversations, our aim is to inspire and empower you to live your most well, happy, and vibrant life. If you're ready to elevate your well-being, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Health Source podcast. I've got another amazing interview for you on the podcast today. I am in conversation with the wonderful Rachael Coopes to celebrate Rachael's new book, The Art of Forgiveness. So I'll share a little bit more about Rach. So Rachael is an award-winning playwright, author, play school presenter, speaker, actor, MC, and yoga and mindfulness educator on Gadigal land. In her 30-year career, she has written, produced, and performed in film, television, theatre in Australia and the UK and the US as well. She's danced on the play school stage for thousands of ecstatic toddlers, starred in many of Australia's most loved series, developed engaging television for kids, and written award-winning theatre for the complex brains of teenagers. She shared the movement and philosophy of yoga with stressed out urbanites, explored the incredible stories of young people in the remote Northern Territory, and used this creative to inspire and educate leaders in the corporate space. With decades of storytelling in many forms under her belt, she has now published 2 books, Find Your Strength, which brings the powerful tools and wisdom of ancient practices into the modern world, and Paris for Beginners, which recounts her experiences in Paris going to clown school. Her 3rd book, The Art of Forgiveness, is coming out on April 29, and it explores forgiveness from many perspectives. With decades of study, practice, teaching, and storytelling, she's eternally grateful for this path and her teachers. So as you can hear, Rachel's got a lot of experience in many different areas of life, and this book is such a beautiful book. I've just finished reading it recently, and it's such a wonderful way for us to really become a lot more mindful and intentional in the way that we approach forgiveness. So there's so many unique perspectives, a lot of yogic wisdom weaved into the pages as well. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Rachael and we'll talk all things the art of forgiveness. Rachael, welcome to the Health Source podcast.
Thank you for having me, Beck.
It's my pleasure, and I'm so excited for us to chat more today about your beautiful new book, The Art of Forgiveness. But before we dive into that, Rachael, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and ask you what your top 3 things are that you do in your life to keep yourself feeling really happy and healthy.
So, yoga, meditation, let's group it as mindfulness practices. It changes depending on how much time I have. Sometimes it's 5 minutes a day. Sometimes it's an hour. So that, moving my body in some way, always, and laughter. Probably trying to find the humor in things on a daily basis keeps me remembering at the end of the day that if we're not doing that, then we're wasting a lot of time.
I love that answer. No one's actually said anything like that before. So thank you for sharing that. We've obviously had lots of, kind of like yoga and mindfulness answers, but never laughter. So I think that's a really important one that you share, because if we take life too seriously, it's not very much fun. So I think that's a really good and timely reminder for all of us.
Well, there's a lot of serious stuff in life, and there's a lot of unfunny stuff that happens. And so I feel like, I think that's what my son likes to find, a joke in everything. And I think that's what I've learned from him is when we don't do that, like when everything gets so serious, we're making things harder than they already are. And I don't know about you, but I'm very good at making things hard enough for myself.
Yes, and I'm a very serious person by nature, so I think those little reminders of, yeah, just to lighten up a little bit. I think it's really important. So that's a really good one for us to start with. Before we dive into all things forgiveness, which is the overarching theme of our conversation today and your beautiful new book. So I think it's a really interesting and relatable topic because we've all had experience hardships in our lives and situations that were painful where we feel like we've been wronged or hurt by another. And so this notion of the art of forgiveness is really relatable. And it's, in these challenging moments, it almost seems like it might be impossible for us to forgive when we are suffering. But I'd love for us to start by asking you, why do you think it's so important for us to forgive, and what your advice would be for someone to take the very first step on their path to forgiveness, and also how we can hold compassion in our hearts towards those that have caused us pain and suffering?
Mm, that's a lot of questions. A lot of very big questions. So I'm going to start with like why forgive. Um, I think the reason I wrote this book was during the pandemic. I saw this real division in communities that I hadn't seen a division in before. And there was this increasing polarization in the world as well. I'm at an age and a stage of life where I sometimes go to weddings, but I oftentimes am hearing people download about messy divorces or business partners betraying them or family dynamics falling apart through, losing a parent and suddenly seeing a side of siblings or other family members that we hadn't before. And I, in my own life as well, I'm a single parent and became a single parent not on purpose. Like I don't think anyone, um, unless you choose to have a child by yourself, I don't think anyone goes into a partnership
Mm-hmm.
knowing it's going to finish at some point. We're all kind of very hopeful in how our journey is going to pan out, of course. So it was not my plan. I was incredibly disappointed that I had kind of ended up exactly where I had spent my life trying to avoid. And I, but I also knew from having been a yogi for most of my adult life that I didn't want to stay being a victim or let resentment continue to foster everything else that was happening in my life, like it being the thing that was creating more of that in my life. And even with all my tools, I found it really hard, to kind of stop beating myself up for the choices I'd made, but also to let go of a version of my life that was no longer going to be. So I think there were a lot of factors that contributed to me getting very interested in forgiveness and why it's so important personally, but also watching people around me just destroy their lives and others' lives for years and years and years. And kind of at the end of, we all came out of the pandemic and um, I don't know, a little bit like, I think we're all a little bit PTSD. And so when I started to talk about the publisher about writing this book, I had written an article, actually, a 2,000-word article for Wellbeing magazine and explored it a little bit and was like, oh, this is really juicy and interesting. And this is when the why really emerged for me because I started to look at the neuroscience and what happens when we don't forgive in terms of mental and physical health, mortality, cognitive decline, really substantial impacts on our lives that I guess I'd seen anecdotally for myself and others, but then really diving into the research, I realized, how beneficial it has been in my life to practice it on the micro every day, but also on the macro. And then for people that I could watch move so gracefully through things, I was like, oh, that's why you do it. Because they were just so peaceful and joyful, and the ones who were laughing no matter what was happening, and the ones who seemed to be able to get back up, after they've been knocked down 9 times, they get back up the 10th time. And I was really interested in that. Like, how do you do that? And when I then went into exploring the etymology of the word, I was even more convinced that there's so many reasons why it's the most important thing for a lot of us that we can do, because it isn't just about, it's not at all about letting someone off the hook. It's actually about letting ourselves off the hook so that we get more peace in our lives. And fundamentally, that's not just impacting our own lives, but everyone around us. And I see, the impact it has on my son and on my family and my friends when I am not forgiving. And it's actually disturbing me equally as it is everyone else, right? So there were so many reasons, but I think now in the global landscape we find ourselves in, that is so complex and so troubling on many levels for many of us, it's reinforced for me even more why at the minimum, the conversation is a really difficult conversation, but worthy one.
You touched on it there briefly, that when we forgive, that it's not condoning someone else's behavior, but rather it's setting ourselves free. So I'd like to just kind of explore that a little bit more with you. And yeah, is this okay? Let me just reword that. So yeah, I think it is a common belief amongst all of us that if we forgive, that we're condoning the behavior of the people that have wronged us, or if we're standing up for ourselves if we have been wronged. But is that actually correct, or is there another different or higher perspective that we can take on that? And what is it that we can gain if we allow ourselves to forgive for us, but also for the other person as well?
So there's a couple of things. The first thing is, let's separate situations of abuse, psychopaths. We know that there is a very small percentage of them in the world, but they exist. I think the word narcissist is bandied around a lot at the moment, but let's use the correct understanding of that word. And even then, there's a difficult conversation around, again, it benefiting us in managing how we can let go of whatever's happened to us in our lives, right? But I want to separate that, because I do think this is not a conversation about staying somewhere that is causing you and those around you suffering and pain. It is not about condoning someone's behavior. And in fact, the process of forgiveness, and this is many people I spoke to, really reinforce this idea that sometimes forgiveness is only possible when we set a boundary, when you have physical distance from someone, when there are things put in place for our safety, whether that is mental, physical, energetic, that it's not about continuing to stay in a loop and allow someone to be an energy vampire and steal your energy. That actually that's not what this is about, and that's not at all what any of us would agree is going to create a healthy dynamic or foster your health and well-being. So in service of your peace of mind, forgiveness, or the practice of forgiveness, may involve moving away from accountability, making someone accountable for something. That may be part of it. It's not saying I let you off the hook. You're not financially accountable even. So it is 100% not saying you stay where you are and continue to allow behavior that is creating harm for you or those around you. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is, it's not toxic positivity. So it's not saying everything is awesome. I'm fine, we're fine, everything's fine either. It is, and we know the neuroscience shows that all the research has shown, and this goes back to, quite old psychology, that denial of what you're feeling and what you're experiencing will prolong your suffering and actually can create mental health issues. So it's not about denying your feelings. It's not about allowing behavior. It's not about someone not taking accountability. But often we cannot control whether anyone is going to take accountability for their own actions. We can't control, and I think we all see this, especially at the moment. Like, when in the history of the world these days can you have a conversation with someone and convince them, when they're already convinced that, red is red, that red is actually blue because you believe that red is blue? Like, it doesn't work. It hasn't in the history of the world. And yet we find ourselves saying, well, if they just see that red is red and admit that what they did is wrong, then we could all move on. But that may never happen. So we cannot control others. That's the reality. What we can control is how we respond to things and how joyous our own life is and how much responsibility we can take for holding to what we believe is true, to our integrity, to our sense of peace in the world. So yeah, it's definitely not allowing a continuing of abusive behavior, and it's not toxic positivity. And I really hope that people don't get confused about that. And in fact, it may be the only way for us to start to work with this process of forgiving someone, like truly, and whether it is, and the etymology gives us so many different ways to understand it. And all the 25 people I interviewed as well have such diverse understanding of what it actually means. But whether it is letting go or giving up, maybe you have to give something up in order to get something back. Maybe it is, and accepting apology when you're not ready. Maybe it is, if you're the one who needs to apologize and someone's not accepting your apology, it is accepting that they're not ready to receive your apology. So we can't force or have any expectations on, the other people involved in the process. I think that's what makes it sticky as well and tricky, is that it's kind of saying, hey, this is a practice for you to have in your life in service of your own peace. And that's going to also serve the people around you. Obviously, like, the more peaceful I am, the more peaceful my son's going to be. We know that. But at the same time, doesn't mean I have to be a doormat. No. Does it mean I have to accept whatever happens to me? Receive behavior without setting boundaries as to what is appropriate in any given relationship? No, it's actually nothing to do with that. And I think the more we know ourselves and the more we know what our boundaries are, the less sticky that gets, because we can be really clear about setting those boundaries without feeling like we need to change the rules. I think it's harder when we have to reset those boundaries, when there's perhaps a relationship that has a history or has got caught in a loop, got kind of stuck, and we have to reframe. That's when it gets really hard. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's just so much to unpack, isn't there? And we've talked a lot, I guess, from the perspective of when we've been hurt by another. But I'm curious to know, and you touched on it a little bit there, if we have, I guess, acted in a way that we, a little bit out of character, something that we would normally deem inappropriate, and then we've caused harm to another, and
Mm.
then we are seeking forgiveness. How, like, what's the process from that side? You mentioned that, um, if we extend an apology and someone's not ready to accept, is it just a matter of doing the best that we can, and what we believe to be right and true, and in offering that to the other person, and then and that act of letting go, like you said, and just seeing where it lands with the other person?
I don't think there is an answer to that question. I think this is this is why the one thing that I'm realizing, and the beauty of writing this book, is I get to have conversations like this all the time. And so I'm constantly processing, because you're understanding, and as you said, having just read it, and the things that are ruminating for you and resonating and kind of present and at the forefront of your mind, that's going to change again in a couple of years if you'd read it in a couple of years, which is so fascinating. Um, and so I feel like, yeah, understanding what our values are, again, is really helpful, because I know when I have messed up, and I mess up all the time, and I'm a Taurian, so I'm really, really, I'm like the bull sitting in the paddock until the red flag gets waved. And then once I go, I go, and it's really hard to shift me back again. And so when I mess up, sometimes I feel like it is big, like I've run at the matador. And so sometimes it's really hard to come back from. And sometimes the more I do it, the more I practice, more and more often going, hey, it's not my best self in that moment, and I'm really sorry. And I'm not asking you to condone my behavior or accept it, and there's different, so the things that I'm working with at the moment is how to do that, how to offer without an explanation, because sometimes an explanation sounds like an excuse. I was really tired, and there are a series of things you didn't understand that had happened before, and yada, yada, yada. And trying to eradicate it and own my behavior and say, and this often plays out again with my son, because we are in a little bubble often. And that's when I can be calm, 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 since I've asked for the sixth time in the morning why he's not dressed. And then I am not my best self, and I'm mean, and and so those moments you can catch yourself quickly sometimes, or perhaps it's a little bit later. But in the bigger things, I feel like it's still a practice for me. So it's around the right time, how I can approach that person in the right moment, the right time, making sure that it's not just trying to make myself feel better, that it is genuinely about in service of them, not just me assuaging my guilt, that it might be clumsy, and it might be, not being too perfect about it. And so I think for each circumstance and each individual, it's really different. Like how and when you do it is very specific. So I don't think there is one answer. I feel like I didn't know in a lot of the research that I did when I was writing the book, I didn't realize so many people had done so much work in this space. I read a book on how to apologize through that process. And I'm like, God, a lot of the time we don't even spend much time contemplating that. Like, what is the best way to offer someone an apology? I had never considered that thing of me justifying it, or I thought it was just me explaining the background. But yeah, maybe there's some justification behind it to say, I'm still a really good person. These are the reasons why it happened. So getting a bit more curious and granular in how I do it has become really interesting. And then also knowing when enough is enough. Like if you've offered someone an apology and they're not ready to take it, then sending gratitude and loving kindness and whatever else to say, I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity to hear me out. I think that's the thing with difficult conversations too, which is why we always avoid them, because they never go as we plan them to. And there's a danger in in us expecting that once we apologize, someone's going to say, that's fine. Sometimes it goes like that, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it's not appropriate for me to apologize. That's the other thing. Like sometimes actually it's more painful for whoever it is on the receiving end for us to be seeking an apology. So I think understanding those times is also very nuanced but important.
It sounds like no matter the direction of where the apology or the forgiveness is going, that it is quite a unique kind of experience and unfolding. So I guess that's where we can cultivate this deeper sense of self-awareness to know what we feel is the best action, whether we are offering the apology or receiving the apology or moving through that forgiveness process. I feel like there's sort of like three prongs to this. We've spoken about seeking the forgiveness of others and then offering it being offered to us. But I'd love to talk to you now about self-forgiveness. And, is this, you sort of touch on this in the book and offer the notion that maybe this is where it all begins with self-forgiveness, whether or not it is we've wronged someone. Or I was thinking about this after I read that part of the book, and we could even be offering self-forgiveness to ourselves for, missed opportunities or not shining our light bright enough, or like there's just such a myriad of reasons why we might be seeking this self-forgiveness. So I'd love to unpack that a little bit with you now. If you've had that experience within yourself, or if you have any wisdom to share around how we can begin that process.
Yeah. So again, the research shows that when we approach, and I won't get technical and go into too much depth about terms. I'll keep it kind of high level, but so I'm generalizing. But when we get to the end of our life, if we can face our death with little regret, and again, this has been kind of proven, those who do go into the process of end of life far more peaceful. So for me, that is a very compelling reason, if nothing else, to start practicing it now. Like I really do. I have a fear of death, like so many people do, I think. I don't fear what happens after. It's the process of it. So anything I can do to make that process more easeful, I'm interested in. So that's the first thing. And part of that, then when you unpack that, part of what the separate research showed was that the things that are harder to let go of are the not doings, as you spoke about, the things we didn't do, the things we didn't say, the missed opportunities. They're actually much harder than the times we messed up and then made amends with ourselves and with others. So, I mean, even that kind of insight in itself to me was, oh, great, I can work with that in my own life, because it's a great reason to do the things that we put off doing, to catch up with the friends or have the dinner that we can't, we were like, oh, I can't afford to go out to dinner, but I really want to see that person. And so go to the cheap and cheerful dinner and have that time with them, to write the book that you keep talking about writing, to start the podcast, to whatever it is, right? To do the things that you want to do. I have done so many things that I thought and invested a lot of time and effort in that I thought, this is a no-brainer. This is going to do really well. And it doesn't. And I think that was the beauty and the painful growth of being with a creative industry since I was young, is like just rejection after rejection after rejection. And there's no guarantees. But what it did teach me from pretty young is, yeah, as long as you've done the thing with all of your heart and all your creativity and you've done your best, then you got to like, the rest is unknown. We don't know why some things work and some things don't. And so, and I lived in Paris when I wanted to. I've done so many things. Like I've chased a lot of those dreams. So I feel that's been really fortifying, because I think if we are doing all of those things that we want to do in life, to the best of our ability, given our circumstances, because also there's a privilege for some of us to be able to do some things that aren't possible for others of us. So with all of that in mind, you know, if we're chasing the things that we can with our full heart, great, then there's sort of nothing to forgive. And Seema Johari, who is Harish Johari's daughter, is a really incredible Sanskrit and yogic scholar. She talked a lot about this. One of the reasons I interviewed her was Keith Kempis, a teacher, said I should talk to her, but because she had described to him that if you know your purpose, if you're in your dharma, then there's no forgiveness, nothing to forgive. And I'm like, that's fascinating. And I think she didn't say that that's what she meant, but as I've been really reflecting on her wisdom, I think part of it is that. It's like when you jump into your life with a sense of trying to find your purpose and then also living all those little moments of meaning in the mundane everyday stuff, there is less to regret. Then the regrets that we do have, whether they are things undone or things that we've done, and I wrote an article in Imperfection a while ago, so I spent a lot of time doing research around perfectionism and how we've kind of moved towards that in society and how detrimental it is to the mental health of young people right now. But more and more, I feel like if we cannot forgive ourselves, it's just impossible to forgive anyone else. It starts with us. If we are not practicing kindness, gratitude, ahimsa, non-harming towards ourselves, it's really, really hard to practice it towards anyone else or in the world around us. And I think we kind of know that deep down, but that's been, again, proven again and again and again, that it starts with us, that those who hold on to bitterness and anger and resentment, it's really hard to let other people be imperfect, because we're not letting ourselves be imperfect. We're not, if there's parts of myself that I don't want to look at as well, and I'm like, I hate that part of myself. I hate that I'm like that, or that I did that, or it's really hard to not do that, for that to turn outwards. And I remember seeing Gabe, my son, when he was little, with Lego, and he was such a perfectionist about it. Like if he built some and then it broke, he was so hard on himself. And I was like, ugh. I feel like that's an aspect of me. I'm not that I'm a clean freak or I'm precious, but I think right deep inside that part of me that I've always worked at being, and in my creative life, I can do it really easily, but I'm not necessarily like that with everything else. I think I can be quite tough on myself. So that also helped me to go, hey, you just got to be a little more kind. And imagine if you could hear, if we put a little speaker from our brain to the world and they could all hear what we said to ourselves on a daily basis. I mean, I'd be horrified. I don't know about you, but I'd be like, the way that I speak to myself, I would never speak to anyone else like that. So it's a really beautiful practice when we start to go, hey, I want to be kinder to, and I want to be more forgiving to other people. I don't know why I can't. It may be that it's just got to be kinder to yourself to begin with. And Osher talks about that too in his journey of recovery. I mean, he's always been very vocal about his process of recovery, but he's like, when I think about that guy pre-recovery, I don't have to be that guy anymore. He doesn't have to, he gets to be someone else. And so I think allowing ourselves the space not just once. This is the other thing. Like, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to mess up this afternoon, probably. I have to pick up. I'll probably mess up. And then, yeah, constantly forgiving ourselves again and again and again and again. So we can do the same for everyone else, like washing the dishes, never ending, this never ending. I hate domestic stuff so much. I feel like it never ends. And that's how I kind of feel about, yeah, self-forgiveness.
I think, yeah, even if we can just extract one thing from everything that you shared there is just a little bit more self kindness and self compassion. And it really does start from within. Because, like you said, if we can't do that with ourselves, how can we expect to show that to others? So I think that's a really beautiful teaching. I wanted to expand. We've sort of touched on a few things there that you mentioned and talking about ahimsa and that kind of thing. In the book, you do share a few ancient yogic teachings and some modalities and some practices and things that can help support us through this forgiveness process. So I'd love to ask you if you have a few favorites, if you can have favorites, or some that you've had personal experience with that has supported you through your personal forgiveness journey as well.
Yeah, for sure. From a psychology perspective, I I know you didn't ask about that, but I wanted to share that I did EMDR for the first time after I'd researched it for the book. And I found that really profound because as a yogi, it's a somatic experience. It involved some kind of physical sensation as well as, eye movement and both sides of the brain. So that was a surprising discovery for me in the process of writing the book, that's been really, really helpful. I I love sound because there's things beyond the mind have always been really hard for me to relate to. The woo-woo aspects. I was an Ashtanga yogi and I came from a very disciplined path where it was practical and tangible. That's why I like the Yoga Sutra, because it's a system, right? And so the more intangible practices have been harder for me. And as I've got older, they're the ones that I have found the most profound and that I resonate with the most. And I perhaps because there've been a longer journey for me to get there. So I think sound healing is phenomenal, and all the stuff that you can't see, energetics. I do a lot of my own chakra work. So whether it is just focusing on one, and I keep it super simple, it's sometimes like meditation where I'm just focusing my awareness on the belly if I feel really disconnected from myself or out of my body. And so all of the intangible stuff I find the most useful at this point. But years ago, for me, things like tapping and finger tapping, anything that was a bit grosser and physical was more helpful to get me back in my body out of fight or flight. I have a tendency to very easily go into sympathetic nervous state. I'm Vata imbalanced already. So all the grounding practices are the things that, for me, in those ancient practices, they've always been an integral part of my practice, but certainly the more time goes on and as life gets more complex and the responsibilities of life feel greater at the time of life that I'm in, and I guess hormones and all the rest of it kind of also adding to that cocktail, anything that is grounding is really helpful. So simple grounding postures, if I'm doing asana, and simple grounding breath. I've a long time ago stopped complex breath practices as well. So, but every morning, and I've done this for a couple of years now, I do my meditation and my breath before I get out of bed, because once I'm up, it's like it's all on, and it might only be a couple of minutes. And part of that is like trying to let go of whatever I'm already bringing into the day. Because I don't know about you, but often I wake up with like a residue of the day before, and I'm really trying to practice dropping all the things every day as a fresh day. Let it go, let it go, let it go. So grounding breath, and that being just three really simple, and I wouldn't even say full yogic breath anymore, three conscious, quite full breaths, minimum, more if I've got time, and then a really accessible meditation. So gone are the days for me of, you know, 3 days in the Blue Mountains doing Vipassana, and present are the days of, oh God, I need 3 minutes of finger tapping, or I need 3 minutes in the morning of let go meditation, really simple mantra meditation. I always come back to that one. My teachers taught it a long time ago when I was at my first overseas yoga teacher training, Sharon Gannon and David Life. We had to do that let go meditation every day. And through life, I always circle back to it. There's something about mantra meditation, whatever the mantra is, that I think is really, especially to interrupt the circuit of rumination. Like if you're in meditation and someone keeps coming back, like someone is stealing your energy, they don't even know that you hate them. They don't even know that you're still obsessing about them. And I'm like, why? You're not even in my life anymore. And I'm still giving you my prana. Like, here you go, have all my energy. I find that that's when mantra meditation can be really, really helpful. I could go on for another 1,000 things, but I'm trying to be concise and think about practically what right now is working.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And of course, that's going to be individual for all of us because we're all so different. And like you said, you touched on your dosha type, and like we just all are all so different with our body composition and our lives and our personality and all the things. So it's going to be so unique. But I just find it really interesting to hear from others what's been supportive for them. So when our listeners read your book, there is such a big list of things that we can sort of scan through there and see what resonates, and it might just take a bit of trial and error to see what feels aligned for you to move forward on your forgiveness journey. And also just in general in life, we need to lean on these practices, especially in the times that we're in. So yeah, it's really important.
I
This
think
has been
too, sometimes we feel like it has to be those formal practices. And I hope when people read the book, they realize that there's benefit in formal practice. But I used to always say, for me, jumping in the ocean, like just that first moment when you go under the water and I come back up, it feels often like the day just drops away, or I can drop some stuff. And now, of course, we know from all the cold plunging that it's probably, I'm getting some vagal toning, right? Vagus nerve reset. But yeah, I think to your point, to make it whatever helps you get back into parasympathetic nervous system and out of rumination is the beginning of being able to self-reflect and figure out how to move forward, or how to let go of stuff, or how to stop ruminating about someone or something.
Absolutely. And yeah, just taking that time for can be challenging in our modern world, but more slowness, more presence, more self-awareness, and to know what's going to serve you best.
Mm.
Rachel, this has been amazing, talking all things forgiveness and all of the other directions that we went on in our conversation today. But I'd love to ask you, just as we prepare to wrap up, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to impart with the listeners as some final words of wisdom?
I think the one really important thing is to not feel like forgiveness is a destination or something we're trying to get to, that it is ultimately, it happens in stages, and it can be really slow, and it can just be a process that you're moving through every day of your life. It can be a way of being. And I love Simi, one of the women I interviewed in the book, says, start with a grain of sand and then it becomes a sandstorm. So I really love that idea that it can feel overwhelming. So if anyone's listened and gone, oh, this doesn't resonate at all because I wouldn't even know where to start with this huge thing, that, yeah, I think starting with like a little tiny piece, a grain of sand, I feel like I'm only just starting to understand a grain of sand of forgiveness. I even have to spending the past few years with it. So start small.
That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. And could you share with us where we can grab a copy of your new book, The Art of Forgiveness, and also where everyone can connect with you and any offerings that you might have as well?
Yeah, beautiful. So you can connect with me on Instagram's my main tool. I am on LinkedIn and Facebook, and I'm pretty terrible at updating my website. I have to get better at that sort of stuff. The book comes out 29th of April, and then it's going to be available in bookstores, online. There's going to be an audiobook, which is exciting. The first two books, I didn't have an audiobook. So I'm kind of pumped about that. That was a really beautiful process. And on my Instagram, in my bio, I'll always have all the different places that you can get it from. Your favorite bookstore or wherever.
Beautiful. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today on all things the art of forgiveness. And thank you for your time today and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for another episode of the Health Source podcast. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Rachel and took a lot away about how we can bring our hearts and our minds and our souls a little bit more to the art of forgiveness, which is something that we all experience throughout our lives. So make sure you grab a copy of Rachel's new book, The Art of Forgiveness, which is out now. And you can connect with Rachel over on Instagram. Her handle is at Rachael Coopes. You can connect with myself on Instagram as well at BeckRussell_. Let us know what you enjoyed most out of this episode and what you're going to take away and implement into your life as well. Thank you, as always, so much for being here and spending your precious time here with me and my guests on the podcast. And until next time, take really good care of yourself, and I'll chat to you again soon.